Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to present our Klimafarm project here at this conference. So I would like to give you today some insights into the Klimafarm project and also talk about how we in practice do the peatland rewetting in our project. So the Klimafarm project aims to implement an ecological and economical use of rewetted peatlands. So what we actually do after the rewetting is that we harvest biomass from rewetted peatlands, as you can see on the one picture with special machines, and afterwards develop various test products from this biomass. And you see here a picture where we test mats that we produced from this paludiculture biomass on a very big music festival to see if they can stabilize muddy ground. So maybe some of you know the WAC festival. Yes, we were there, and it was quite a nice and interesting time there, and also successful for this product, and I think also for the whole project. But to start a little bit more from the beginning on, the Klimafarm project is located in central northern Germany, in Schleswig-Holstein. That's a landscape shaped by rivers and also with a precipitation surplus. So carbon-rich fen soils dominate or developed over a very long time and dominate the lowlands. And the landscape is also situated mostly at or below the sea level. So we have there a long drainage history for settlement, but especially for agricultural use. And today, as you can see on the picture, the landscape is really characterized by the drainage infrastructure and the agricultural sites on drained peatland, or peat soils. This map here is showing the distribution of peat soils in Germany. So what you can easily see is that the majority of peat soils is located in northern Germany, with 10% of peat soils located in Schleswig-Holstein, so the very northern part of Germany. And here, about 15% of agricultural sites are on drained peat soils. So we have really a great potential actually for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from these peat soils, but it means that we have to rewet them. Otherwise, we will continue to lose the carbon to the atmosphere. And on the other, furthermore, this rewetting also means that we have to find or implement ways for an economically viable way of agriculture in this area. So this is in short the idea of the Klimafarm project. To better understand a bit why peatlands have such a great potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, I show you this picture where you can see on the one side that drained peatlands emit up to 25 tons of CO2 per hectare and year just by the decomposition of peat. I think most of you know peat is just the undecomposed biomass that developed over very, very long times. And under conditions with a high water table that substantially reduces decomposition. And as you lower the water table, as you drain the peat, the decomposition of this biomass or organic matter starts. And when you then rewet these peat soils, you have just by the rewetting a reduction potential of about 20 tons CO2 per hectare and year just by the stop of, or immediate stop more or less, stop of decomposition of the peat. This is a picture how a typical agricultural site in northern Germany looks like. So you have a drainage ditch in the middle, and then on both sides a grassland used as a dairy, used for dairy cattle. Yeah, now to come a bit more into the Klimafarm project. So this project is funded for 10 years by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment until 2031. And the project is based at the Schleswig-Holstein Nature Conservation Foundation. It mainly consists of three main parts. At first, the rewetting of, until the end of the time of the project, 300 hectares, which means that after the rewetting, there's no access with conventional agricultural machines possible, or it's no longer possible. After the rewetting, we start with the wet management until the end of the project time of 400 hectare of project sites. So the difference between the 300 or the 100 hectare difference is just because we start, or some sites were already rewetted in the beginning of the project. And we do not cultivate any plants, we just harvest the naturally grown biomass. And during this, we also try to test various harvesting chains and use different machines, as you can also see on the picture. And as a third step, we try to develop different products from the harvested biomass. And I can really say that there's a diverse demand from these products from paludiculture, and also really a high public interest in the products and the materials and the results and experience we gain during our work. A bit more focus on the actual rewetting process. It always consists of more or less 4 parts. So we begin with the site surveys, for example, monitor the water level, evaluate the hydrology, the peat quality, the habitat or species diversity. Then afterwards, the concrete planning starts. So, for example, we define the target water levels, or plan the deconstruction of the drainage infrastructure, or plan where we have to install controlled discharge possibilities. After the planning is finished, we go in contact with the local authorities or communities, and in the end, we start the implementation of the rewetting measures, the construction work. I would like to show you some pictures of how it actually looks like when the construction work is done. So one possibility we have is to block the drainage ditches to reduce the discharge from the peat soil. Then another possibility or another measure we practice is that we search for the drainage pipes within the peat soil and interrupt them or remove them to reduce the lateral discharge within the soil. And also we construct low dams to improve the water retention on the site. And very important, we also install adjustable pipes to allow the controlled drainage, for example, to avoid that neighboring areas are not affected by our measures. Of course, such a big and long project, we face some tricky challenges or questions. For example, we often deal with the question, what actually is paludiculture? So at which water table is necessary to speak of paludiculture? Another big issue is really that the available agricultural machines are still very space inefficient. So we think that there are really technical developments necessary in this area. And we also often discuss about appropriate raw material prices. So, for example, as the machines, as I just explained, the machines are comparatively inefficient. So the material that we harvest from rewetted sites is comparatively expensive compared to biomass that comes from drier sites. And so altogether, also the transition for the local farmers is at the moment still very expensive, also as they have to invest, for example, in new machineries, and difficult to plan since it is not clear which profits they can really gain from this. What do we mean in our project by paludiculture? So we try to achieve a long-term water table close to the surface, which means a water table at 10 centimeters below the surface. And this is especially important during summer, when the microbial activity is highest during the year, and also the plant activity. That's a relevant issue really to for the conservation of carbon in the peat soil. And then under such conditions, the rewetting of peat soils can really enable a long-term value creation in the agriculture of peat soils, whereas when you practice agriculture on drained peat soils, it is always limited in time during the degradation of the peat. And for us, it also means the paludiculture is also practicing nature conservation, so the restoration of wet meadows, which are typical wet habitat for endangered species. To come to an end, the Klimafarm project tries to achieve or develop an economically viable paludiculture in the peatland landscape, and also tries to implement or to develop long-term local value chains for local farmers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Wiebke, also for being perfectly in time. And are there any questions from the audience?
Thank you very much for this interesting insight into your great project. Do you have special machinery? Do you buy them, or do you modify them yourselves?
Of course, I'm prepared to this question. So this is a picture where you can see what kind of machinery we actually use. I'm not very familiar with the words in English, so this so this one here is Mähraupe. I don't know the English word. A machine that is typically used in the mountain regions, and that is somehow someone found out that you can also use this on sites with a high water table. So this is actually the machine we use the most. And then we have for smaller sites, the other one up there. This is also something that comes from the mountain regions, where you have a very much slope. But you can see it's really a small machine, and it's really only possible to use this on smaller sites. Talk about this more in German, but in English it's not. It's a bit complicated. Sorry? And this these spikes technique, I don't know.
Okay, there's another question, I think.
Yes, thank you for the talk. I was wondering, I often hear when we discuss about these rewetting projects that we don't have sufficient water in many regions where we had former peatlands to actually rewet them. So here in Schleswig-Holstein, it seems quite simple. You just destroy the drainage system and the peatland seems to be restored. can you estimate for which percentage of peatlands this is actually a viable option, and for how much percentage it's possibly not a viable option?
Percentage, you mean in Schleswig-Holstein
Or in Germany, because we always discuss that on a...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any numbers about this, but you're right. It's actually the case that in Schleswig-Holstein, the situation is comparatively easy, as we have still this precipitation surplus. Also, the climate protections say that we will have, or will continue to have this. And yeah, I would say we always will have or we always need to have some drainage infrastructure. We have to more talk about how to manage it, how to manage the water in the landscape in a different way than we do it at the moment. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. I don't know if you mentioned it, but what are you going to do with the material? So do you already have a concept for economic paludicultures?
So what we do, I try to explain, is that we have these, or we try to get in contact with different companies who are interested to develop products, test products, really in very, very different, for their very, very different applications. Yeah. So in the beginning of the project, I was thinking, okay, we maybe will get in contact with paper fabrics or so, but it's really not the case. That's what I mean by we have a really high demand and interest in the products. So this is not a, let's say, bottleneck. Yeah. They are, what are they made of? Yeah. What's the plant in it? I can't say really, because on our fields, as I say, we just harvest what is growing on there. So we have sedges, we have different kind of grasses. So it's really different from site to site. And I cannot say what actually is in there. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, I think we have to continue, but maybe we have some more time in the end, depending on how it goes. I'm quite happy that we also have an international guest, Doug Macmillan from Ireland, from Green Restoration Ireland, and we'll talk about, well, restoration of peatlands in Ireland, I hope. No, wrong one.
Yeah, not me. Thanks very much for having me here. It's great. It's been a really interesting couple of days, and looking forward to the field trip tomorrow. So I think I'm the only person from Ireland speaking, so I have to fly the flag for Ireland, which is complicated by the fact that I'm from England originally. So anyway, I'll do my best. And as Barbara was saying, it's the strong ones that have stayed, but we've been talking about carbon farming the last 2 days, and what we say to our farmers is, if you want to do carbon farming, you should have peatlands, because that's where it's at. Yeah. Anyway, so they're missing the trick. What can I say? So just a bit of context. This is the Irish peatland map. Most of our work has been done in the Midlands. So these raised bogs, the dark blue areas, we have about 310,000 hectares of this, which has been extensively modified. There's only about 15% left in good condition. So it's a big issue. And just a few figures, you can see there's quite a lot. So 23% of Ireland is peatland, stores over 2 billion tons, maybe emitting up to 10 million tons of CO2 annually. And yeah, so it's a big issue. It's a big percentage of our emissions. Just again, for those that maybe don't know, apologies for preaching to the converted, seeing lots of peatland experts here, so sorry about this, but I don't assume everyone knows this. But raised bogs, they all came from lakes originally. No. Anyway, so here, which filled in. So if I have my water lily leaf in a lake, only a part of that will not degrade, and it will fill up the lake over time. Shallow glacial lakes were filled up, and they became fens. So fens come in different forms. This is one. You can have extensive reed beds, but they're characterized. They have this rich black peat, which, because it's in contact with the groundwater, it would have lots of minerals and nutrients, very good for farming. And then over time, once the old level of the lake was reached, and for a while afterwards, it transitioned from a fen to a raised bog. So once it was about half a meter above the original level of the lake, it became a bog. And you can see there's quite a difference. So we go from this to this, and we have this, it's characterized, we have this white peat, the moss peat, which is very low nutrient content and high acidity. And this is important for what we're trying to do, because we're looking for solutions for cutover peatlands in Ireland. And the way it's harvested is you have the peat bank, you remove the top, which is the acid peat because it's useless for the fire. You throw that in the hole from the year previously, and you're going for the black peat at the bottom. So what you get is a real mix of the acid and the fen peat. So it's it changes very much. And of course, that determines what crops you can possibly grow in these areas. So we did a previous project. We're currently doing Peatlands for Prosperity. This was an EIP. And just a few things we took out of this, just a summary, obviously, because we don't have time. Just after we started the project, there was a target set for 80,000 hectares of peat grassland rewetting, because the department identified that there was very high emissions, and nobody defined what is rewetting. And in the Midlands, we have a lot of peat extraction, and they're restored, and they look like this. So in the absence of proper messaging or communication, a lot of farmers thought this is what we were talking about. And of course, we have a wet multi-species sward trial, and of course, this is it. So water table management is a better wording to be used. And there was a lot of damage done by this rewetting terminology. So we think messaging is very important, and clear communication as to what that means. We also identified there's a huge lack of awareness. So the farmers don't know that their fields are undergoing invisible erosion. So they're shrinking half to 1 centimeter every year. They said, oh, I thought the rocks and the tree stumps were coming up through the field. And we're like, okay, we had to correct this. And of course, it's okay when you have 1 meter or 2 meters of peat left. But when you're down to 10, 20 centimeters, you're running out of productive field. The other issue was nobody has any idea how much carbon is stored in peatlands. So just to give an idea for those that don't know, here's a bit of blanket bog in the middle. There's more carbon in this than in all the forests on that mountainside. So we have very high levels of carbon storage. So this is important as well. Another thing as well was trees in the wrong place. You know, they said, oh, we stopped cutting the bog and the trees came in, isn't it great? And we're like, no, not really. They dry out the peat and so on. Again, once they knew, they wanted to do something about it. So that was another common misconception that we had to address. And then lastly, of course, you know, we started talking about paludiculture, and you're like, paludi what? What is this? They have no idea of other options. So farming is based on drainage and growing stuff, not rewetting and doing new things. So that was another issue. And then just lastly, in the context, we've been talking a lot about carbon credits and so on over the last couple of days. There's an overwhelming preference to have a secure source of income through government payments rather than the private sector. There's a huge lack of trust. It's just the general takeaway. Okay, so just the problem with peat. So as I said, it's essentially completely different. I think it's been mineral soils all the way up until now. And of course, it's all organic matter. So this is what it's used for. This is a nice Irish turf fire. And what I say to the farmers is, you know, the way you burn your peat on the fire, when you have it drained, it's on a slow burn. Basically, you know, the way you make a nice stew, you put it on the ring at the back on the lowest heat possible. It's continuing to degrade. So you have a slow burn continuously. This is the situation at the moment with our peat grasslands. Business as usual is about 30 tons of CO2 per hectare per year, just under. So what we did as part of the project was we gave the farmer the choice, because my colleague identified, he collated the data from Ireland, UK, and Holland, and basically every 10 centimeters change in water level is about 5 tons of CO2 per hectare per year. So any improvement is good. Our fields, we drained to at least 1 meter or more. So what we left it up to the farmers, how much they wanted to raise the water level by. And generally what they went for was a half rewet, which is good, but it still entails 10 to 15 tons of CO2 emissions per hectare per year. So another key thing, of course, is 40 below is kind of business as usual. You can continue to farm as you've always farmed. And what we recommended was that farmers be paid for this and the carbon savings associated with this. But we still needed to go higher. Above this, you have an impact. The peat is too wet. You get less grades in days because the cattle will sink into the field. The peat stops degrading and releasing the nitrates, feeding the grass, so you get lost productivity and so on. So we started to investigate paludiculture options. Oh yeah, and of course the other issue with peat, it doesn't just degrade and go into the air, it also goes into the water. The dissolved and particulate carbon and the nitrates is a big issue. So what we did was a business as usual, because the target was 80,000 hectares of rewetting. We just assumed we have about 300,000 hectares of peat grasslands in Ireland. And we said, look, let's assume that they're all drained to 60 centimeters. And we did up to the 40 centimeter threshold. Then we could be saving anything from 3 to 5% of Ireland's current emissions without any impact on agriculture. But there's issues, of course, above this, as I just explained. And then, of course, another issue we have to deal with, that sounds really great, 300-400 hectares of continuous peatlands, is adjacency, because we could only work with farms, fields within the farms. We couldn't deal because the next door neighbor isn't involved, so therefore we couldn't do it. So this is a big issue. So anyway, step 2 then, we proposed and we did a lot of partial rewetting. We also did some full rewetting when it was just summer grazing. So we could raise it all the way. The pasture would dry off in the summer and they could still graze it as they had always done. Paludiculture then, yeah, so obviously we started this, that's the definition, wetter farming and forestry. And essentially, yeah, we promote this as a big win. And particularly, you'll see in a second, that we have a lot of land which is available to trial this. So obviously there's a climate mitigation that we were just seeing in the previous presentation. And of course, the securing of carbon stocks. Again, peatlands are the most space-efficient ecosystems for storing carbon that exist. This is the giant redwood forest. There's the little person at the bottom. One of the bogs, a bit of water. It's dry. So one of the bogs associated with some of our farmers, it would be 2 to 3 times this amount of carbon storage. Right, okay. So I think we've been hearing a lot about in the last couple of days that there's this revised push to productivity and competitivity. So we see wetter farming as an option to move, to challenge this false dichotomy, So we have our curious cows who represent production, and then we have conservation. So we have a real opportunity, which I'll explain to you now, to address this. So this is a typical, oh my God, there's no water available. Is this a, what's the word? This is a tale of rewetting. Yeah, thank you. The fields say that as well. So this is a small bog, peatland that we work around. This will be the original extent of the peatland. There's a number of farms around this. And essentially there's 3 zones. So we have the remnant bog in the middle, which is about 25%. That's 12 meters deep, very huge carbon store. Around this, we have the cutover where the land was drained. It was cut for the fuel that you saw on the fire, and it's been abandoned. So the drains are still there. There's still all the emissions, the air to the water, invasion of scrub and trees, and so on. And outside this, we have grassland and forestry. So what we say is the opportunity here is that, as we've already identified, we can partially rewet the fields, no impact, pay the farmers to do this. And there's all this cutover land is wasteland. It's sitting there, it has no income from farm payments. They're not doing anything with it. They're probably not very happy about it. So this is the area that we're targeting with the work that we're doing. So, and of course, what that would do is it would create a buffer zone. This is incredibly valuable. Ireland has 60% of Western Europe's remaining raised bog. So by rewetting this area, we will restore, maybe with a little bit of extra intervention, we can fully restore this area. So, and in terms of Ireland, yeah, so the potential, as I said, there's only 16% of it is in good condition. So we have an opportunity to produce things from these areas and restore what's there. So just a kind of flight of fancy. We've set up one of our paludiculture farms here, but it's only small scale. So just kind of thinking ahead how this might look, this is what we came up with. So you can see the middle bit is there, and then a bit of the area beyond that is also pretty good. So that can be restored as bog. And then the proposal would be to use a mix of different crops around this. So the aim would be for grassland, because in Ireland, cattle are very important. Our first legends from Cuchulainn and the Knights of Ulster are wars about cattle over 2,000 years old. So we need to provide grass. But then after that, we're looking at high value crops, so that if you have a relatively small area, it's worth the farmer's while to prepare this, to cultivate it, and to obtain a harvest from this. And this would be useful for economic diversification. So yeah, so that's, as I said, so as you can see, we have the central raised bog restored, and around this we have a range of things, sphagnum, cranberries, blueberries, and also we have a lot of cut over woodland. So this can be coppiced to produce biochar and introduce structural diversity in these habitats. Oops, wrong way. I have it upside down. Okay, I knew something was wrong. Okay, so just in terms of what we've tested, so as I said, our initial focus was grass. We need to do this. So we have a wet, randomized design, multi-species grass experiment. And the aim there is obviously the grass production will reduce when you raise the water table, but we need a thick sward that will hold the cattle, and we need legumes to replace the nitrate that is no longer released from the degrading peat, and herbs that will yield well in those areas. So that's what we're doing. And then we also have these other things. So we have the whole range of bogberries, cranberries, chokeberries, blueberries, and the other things. And also another issue we have in Ireland is that 40% of our forestry is on peat. So not very good. So we also have a paludiculture forestry trial where we're trialing different species, doing very well. We're going to do a bigger trial of this in the near future. Okay, so yeah, so I think hopefully you're getting the idea that peatlands in Ireland, and particularly cutover, they're very complex. You know, so with a cutover, it can go in 4 directions. It can go back to raised bog. It can go to a range of fen habitats. It can go to scrub. It can go to woodland. It can go to wet grassland. So what we wanted to do was to identify a sustainable use option for all of those. So that's what we've done, and that's what we're trying to implement. So we've done the small scale. We've done the next level up, and we want to get up to that landscape level. That is what we need to get the benefits. So we see this essentially a combination of paludiculture and restoration is going to give us a wet landscape mosaic or a peatscape. And as I said, how are we going to do this? Well, the farmer has a stranded asset with no value, and this will support economic diversification. Also, from an ecological point of view, fen habitats also need active management. So income from growing crops will provide the necessary means to do this. Yeah, so the result was that we had initial skepticism, and then I think one of the comments from our farmers was this was the best thing they'd ever done, and the neighboring farmers are looking to get on board, and this is very important. Okay, 3 minutes. Okay, economic persuasion. So we think stacked income. So we have carbon credits, we have the paludiculture, we have ecosystem survey payments, and peatland-friendly food and materials would be the income streams. And very important is to have demonstration farms to show the farmers what the options are. We want to give them a range of options, not just say, you know, you can do a couple of things. We want to show them, and then they pick. So this is the Regans and the Egans, 3 generations of Egans here, working away. So that's those farms. And then I've got to get to the lessons for Europe, which is part of the talk title. So obviously, look, this is Ireland. We have a different setup. We have a very complex landholding structure. But I think, and probably what we're doing is not perfect, but we need to get moving. We need to have an option for all of these different land uses. And I think the need in Europe is to re-wet 1 million hectares annually to 2050. So we're quite a bit off target. We also need to have food security and produce more biomass and materials. And this is the way we're going to resolve that. So just to finish up, policy approaches. Yes, I suppose I often get the impression it's like we're trying to assemble the plane as we're flying. We're trying to test crops. analyze the results, think about new markets, business opportunities, etc. But look, we need to get there. So that's what we're trying to do. So what we think, sorry, it's just the thing has been a bit distorted. So we need to prioritize, what am I saying there? Farmer and community engagement, yes. So engagement, because every farmer has his neighbors. There's a unique community of farmers and other landowners around each of those specks of peatland has a whole community around that need to be engaged. We need effective messaging, not rewetting. We need water table management, awareness raising around these issues. We need demo and lighthouse farms to show farmers the options so that they can pick what they want to do. We had a real conventional contractor who came to one of the farms, and he went away and said, I quite like blueberries. So he's going to do blueberries. So that was a bit of a surprise. But, this was because he had a choice. So we think that works well. So the farmer should choose what water level increase and what crop or habitat they get to restore or to create. And we also want to align culturally with the farmers. They want more land, and they have wasteland. They want to produce things, and they want long-term sustainable income. So this is what we're trying to achieve. And then we have the stacked income opportunities from high-value carbon credits. Well, it's really going to miss. And it needs to be practical and flexible. So look, it's not perfect, but this to this is much better than is a big improvement. And we still have that huge target that we need to meet. Farmers, obviously, we're there to provide them with the guidance and support, so that is necessary. It's a new form of agriculture. It's going to need new machinery, all kinds of things that we were just looking at in the previous presentation. Cooperatives would be a good economic model that farmers are used to work together to do this. And we need coherent, consistent policy, given long-term. This is one of the issues, longevity. We were only a short-term project, and the farmers were always saying, well, what happens next year when it finishes? And we couldn't, we said it would be good to get support, but it wasn't forthcoming. So that's that. So we need that long-term commitment that will span electoral cycles. They need to know that at the end of the 5 years, they've made a long-term land use change, even though they're using a low-risk cutover habitat. This is what makes that easier to help them get over all the obstacles. So that's that. Oh, sorry. Next one. Okay, and then lastly, yes, we also need, in Ireland, we need water management infrastructure for those big drains. We need to cross departmental divides, and we need to do all the things that the previous speaker is working on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have time for one question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, just came into my mind. I assume that most of the farmers have livestock now before you re-wet.
Yes, yeah, they do, yeah.
And how do you convince a livestock farmer to become a blueberry farmer? In particular, blueberries is a little bit different from livestock, and it needs a lot of education because blueberries is really not an easy task to do. Also, harvesting blueberries, you need probably other people to do the harvesting and all these kind of things. So the question is how to convince farmers to move into other options.
So I suppose we didn't get them to stop livestock farming. We got them to, so some of the farmers that had more extensive grazing fields, we raised as I said, they continue summer grazing. So here we were using the land that they weren't using, and they want to diversify and they're interested. And I just suppose they're more, but what we need, that's why I was talking about the economic incentives. It's all very well having the enthusiastic farmers who want to trial things and do new things, but if we're going to scale it up, we need that support. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't gone to a dairy farmer yet and said, "Can you switch your farm to blueberries?" yet. I haven't dared, So, but yeah, we're just working. As I said, this cut over land is just sitting there; it's not being used. So that's kind of what we're project, and that's what they say. The farmer said, "Well, why are you coming to annoy me about my grassland when I have all this bog that's sitting there and nobody's doing anything with?" So.
Okay, thank you. Our next talk then is by Jan Peters, who's the director of the Sucre Foundation, and I think he will address some of the political and economic approaches to speed up rewetting, restoring, and also converting land to paludiculture.
Yeah, thank you, Bärbel, and thanks for inviting me here to the conference. Quite a complicated title, you have read it, so I will mainly speak about political and economic approaches on accelerating and really implementing in larger scale peatland restoration with a focus on Germany, but there are definitely also some points which could be upscaled to other European countries. We have already seen the peatland map of Germany. I would like to introduce it a little bit into the policy and legal framework we have here. So we have a national climate law, which subscribes climate neutrality until 2045. With the update of the climate law, we also have now specific LULUCF targets, which says that till 2045, we should have a sink of 40 million tons CO2 equivalent per year. And as you probably all know, we are far away from reaching this. Currently, the whole LULUCF sector is actually a source of CO2 and not a sink at all. And it's going into the wrong direction. And one of the reasons for that are, of course, the high peatland emissions, which we already heard, more than 7% of the total emissions of Germany, more than 50 million tons per year emissions. And that's why there was actually a successful lawsuit by the Deutsche Umwelthilfe against the federal government last year to submit a climate protection program that complies with the climate targets in LULUCF. And this is what the government, the Ministry of Environment, is working on at the moment. And definitely peatlands will play a major role in that, as it is the biggest source of emissions actually in the sector. Then we had 2021 a federal and state target agreement on peatlands for climate protection. As in Germany, of course, federal states play a major role. Basically, land use and also conservation issues are dealt mostly on the state level. That's why it's very important that the federal government and state governments agree on what they want to achieve and how they want to achieve. And we have that. We are very happy about it. And this was followed then by a national peatland protection strategy 2022, which had the target or has the target to reduce 5 million tons CO2 equivalents per year from peatlands until 2030. We are also still far away from that. And as I said, we have more than 50 million tons per year at the moment emissions. So it's actually also a little drop on the hot stone, but at least it's a start. Yeah. And to operationalize this, we have since 2023 the National Program for Nature-Based Climate Protection, Aktionsprogramm Natürlicher Klimaschutz, which has like roughly 4 billion euros for achieving these goals. Unfortunately, just yesterday we saw a report that actually most of the funds which are in there, which are like meant for peatland restoration, that they are not spent because the right framework is not there to spend it, especially for land users and landowners. So there's still a long way to go. But we are also very happy that the new government, you probably know we had elections beginning of this year, and also the new coalition government of conservative and social democratic party is really committing to this Aktionsprogramm for nature-based climate protection, and especially to the peatland strategy, which is of course a strong sign that they got the message that if we want to achieve our climate targets within the LULUCF sector, we have to act on peatlands. And it is not easy because peatlands, as they are so multidimensional, they are actually covered in many different policy fields. And as policy is often quite sectoral between different ministries, different agencies, we need a lot of cooperation there. Together with Agora Agrar, last year we published this kind of framework overview where we have policy legislation which is actually like having influence on peatlands and leverage for the restoration of peatlands. It's soil field, biodiversity conservation, of course, the water, very important, but often forgotten, unfortunately. Also the building sector for materials, I will come to that later. Agriculture, of course, forestry, spatial planning, climate, and I presented mostly the German framework, but on top, of course, we also have the European framework by European Union for LULUCF regulation, for example, and now also the government is working on the national restoration plan for the nature restoration regulation. So there are like new things on top. So the question is now, how do we bring that into practice? What is needed to make it work in practice and at the necessary speed? We worked on that question quite a lot, and we came up with quite comprehensive science-based recommendations to actually adapt legislation and policies in these fields I just showed you. Last year, we published a report by Sabine Schlacke and Michael Sauthoff, two very well-renowned law professors, on what can be done. They kind of separated their recommendations into different fields. One is that we have to accelerating the land availability, because we have same what you described for Ireland, that we have a lot of landowners and land users, which then have tenure systems and so on and so forth. So we have to accelerate to really kind of can work on the ground. For that, we need more standardized and simplified land consolidation procedures, so Flurbereinigung in Germany. For rewetting projects, we need the legally established compensation options for rewetting areas, and not just that it starts always from the scratch, these things, which still happens quite often, and expanding contractual nature conservation measures for rewetting projects under the nature restoration or conservation law. Then we need, beside the land availability, accelerating the project implementation. For that, it is very important to have the terminology right and enshrine peatland protection as a conservation objective and as with an overriding public interest in the nature conservation laws and Bundesnaturschutzgesetz, to exempt it from compensation obligations, because still very often we have the case if you rewet a land and you have to remove forest, or you kind of convert grassland into paludiculture, for example, you actually have to compensate that the forest or the grassland at another point, which is counterproductive quite often. So there need to be exemption on that. We have to include the concept of natural climate protection into water law, because this is still not recognized in the water law. The water law is mostly to drain the lands, to get the water out, but not to keep it in there. And we have to accelerate the granting of permits by standardization and prioritizing peatland restoration projects, as this quite often takes a lot of time. And we should make more use of steering peatland rewetting projects through spatial planning measurements. That is especially also governed by federal states, and natural climate protection through peatland rewetting could be much more included there, for example, by designated priority areas, as we have it, for example, for renewable energy at the moment. But then, of course, the next question is, how does this policy comes into practice, and how is practice again shaping policy? Because only if it's fit for purpose, it will also work. And I would like to present you some of our work we do in the Sucre Foundation as partner in the Greifswald-Meyer Center. So one is that you have to bring the public and decision makers to the field. So we are having a lot of these field days on restoration and paludiculture sites to really like explain, show, educate what is going on there. And this has like quite strong effects. For example, we had Delara Burkhardt, a member of European Parliament from Social Democratic Party in one of our sites. And the week after, she had a speech in the parliament on a drought situation at that year. It was very hot there, as you can also see on the picture when we visited. And they really liked that it was so wet and so cool there. And she was actually talking in the European Parliament then about paludiculture, about the actually, climate adaptation effects, cooling and keeping water in the landscape of paludiculture. And also providing accessible information, not only scientific reports and stuff, but also really like facts, figures in an appropriate form. So for example, we published 2 years ago the Peatland Atlas, also German version, Moor Atlas, and that proved to be very successful measure to really like bring the message out there. Then also local policy making action should be supported, for example, by feasibility studies. So what could work in the specific region, capacity building. For example, now we work a lot with local peatland managers from water boards to educate them into peatland specifics. There's also a new program, Peatland Specialist in Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, which is like educating people also for future administration jobs. Then we have these landscape walks, which was like invented in Corona times, actually, when you couldn't meet in rooms. So we just decided to go out and talk there, but it proved to be a very important measure for trust building and cooperation. And really like work in local peatland councils on local strategies. For example, we have an EU-funded Horizon project, Alpha Wetlands, where we're working on a living lab in Malchin in the area. And there we come up with a lot of these like local strategies, what to do, and also involving like all the stakeholders there. And then last but not least, also engaging business is very important. Like we already had the question now, what kind of products are then actually made from this paludiculture biomass? And we have there the lock-in effect, that the industry business will only start to invest in that when they are sure that they will have a supply of biomass. And on the other hand, the farmers will only start to grow the biomass when they know that there is a demand from the business, from the companies. So we would like to bridge that gap. And for that, we started the initiative Tomorrow together with the Environmental Foundation Michael Otto, and which has 3 pillars. One is actually like ecology, the practical demonstration of peatland restoration with paludipotential. So we had in April this year a very nice event in Brandenburg, not far from here, close to Angermünde, where we actually started the rewetting of a potential paludiculture site. Then we started an alliance of pioneers. I will talk more about that. And we also advocate for better measures there. So we first needed to activate the market forces of paludiculture, some more knowledge and experience. So we started with a feasibility study, what is actually possible. Then with the knowledge we gained there, we formed an alliance of pioneers. So with partners, business partners who really would like to get involved there, and then starting to test and piloting potential products where we are at the moment. I will show you a little bit on that later. And then having stop and go decisions and go for upscaling. So the feasibility study, which you can download later, we looked at, we have roughly 1 million hectare drained peatlands under agriculture. And if we assume that 5% of raw material in the industry which could use it is from paludiculture, we would actually have a potential of 300,000 hectares area for rewetting in a conservative scenario. So that would already, if we could achieve that only 5% of the raw material in these fields could be replaced, then we already like have a big win actually. So we started to form the coalition, and we came up with 15 major companies. Probably you know some of these names here. Also some international companies like Procter & Gamble, but in Strabag, but mostly focusing on the German, Austrian market, because that's where we know each other and where we can start from, but with potential also to upscale Europe and global. And we had a very nice event involving them last year, where we started this this coalition also with the former agricultural minister Cem Özdemir and Steffi Lemke at that time, and of course Michael Otto as a grandfather of entrepreneurship in Germany, was very pushing or pulling actually for the companies to join in. And we have first results. We have cardboard boxes by Otto and Obi, and they actually just recently won the German packaging prize in the category sustainability. We have a lot of other pilot products in the pipeline, which will come up soon. Also construction materials, which is very important that we not stay with packaging, but also go into construction. And what is very important, we have a project on that, is also to bring the agriculture and the farmers into that. So that's what we work in the Paludi Alliance project, also funded by the Agricultural Ministry, where we really connect them. That's a nice excursion we had with business people and farmers in the Teufelsmoor in Lower Saxony, close to Bremen. And yeah, a lot of very interesting things started there. So to summarize, actually, it's very important to build new alliances for peatlands, peatland restoration and paludiculture, because only then you will get the acceptance and the speed and scale we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Again, there's time for one question. Oh, no question? Oh, okay. Yeah.
So just about the business side of things, how did that start, or did you put an advert in the papers, or did you start with the Michael Otto Foundation? What was the process?
Yeah, I can of course talk hours about that, but to keep it short, we started with this feasibility study where Sustain, the consultancy that interviewed a lot of industry partners to get a sense what their interest is and how they could be attracted to such a thing. And then of course it is very important to have the right people who speak the right language. Yeah, we as peatland scientists, ecologists, from an environmental NGO, also researchers from university, cannot really talk to them in their language so that they understand and that they actually get on board. So we had the big luck that our partner from Michael Otto Umweltstiftung, that they were from the management, from business sector, so they could really kind of speak their words, their language, and really convince them, because many of them have never heard about what paludiculture and peatlands, what it is, but these facts and figures, but also the language convinced them. And then of course also very good innovative ideas and you also need to have courage to start with that. Yeah.
We have got time for one more question because we are trying to sort something out in the background. So if there is one more question, please go ahead. Okay. Let's use the gap.
Yeah, and maybe then I have a little bit more time to answer on this question. It's of course the language to speak. It's the formats you have. For example, this big conference we had last year, or this opening event. We would have never done that like this because it's a little bit shiny and I don't know, making a big buzz of something which is just starting and you don't know what actually comes from it. But that is what they attract them. Yeah, they want to be in such a big event with the ministers, with Michael Otto, with the big bosses and stuff. That's what they want. And if you want to achieve to come into these markets with these big companies, and only when we have them, actually, I believe we can really change the picture. You need to kind of follow that way, at least a little bit without losing yourself in it. But as long as you feel comfortable and you have good partners to do that, I think that's a pretty good way forward.
Thank you, Jan. Somehow Our next presentation would have been online, but we lost our speaker, unfortunately. I have the honor to step in. I'm Bärbel Thiemeyer of the Thünen Institute for Climate Smart Agriculture. My talk would have been the next one. So, I start now. I will summarize quite a lot of things that have been said by others before me. So I might be able to manage to keep in time, actually. So what is paludiculture and what can we do? What products might come out of this new land use? And we understand paludiculture as a productive use at West Peatlands while conserving the peat. So the water level needs to be high enough to really conserve the peat. We might have even peat formation, but I'll come to that later. And of course, earning money is also an important aspect of it. We can distinguish between planted or permanent crops and between fan and bog peatlands. And the major crop on bogs would be peat mosses for horticultural substrate and some other applications. I'm a bit dubious about blueberries. I would like to talk about that in the break later. And on fan peat, because fan is so diverse, we have a range of options from reed, which is used for root thatching, over cattail thatches, and even trees. And the other option would be to use wet grasslands and to use the heterogeneous vegetation which is established by succession, like in the talk by Wiebke earlier. So it can be very diverse. Mainly this happens on bog peat, but we have also situations on fan peat. We have situations where the bog peat is below, for example, river water level, and we have not the hydrology and the water quality for typical bog vegetation anymore. I also have a map of organic soils. It's a bit different. We have also made one, and we distinguish between different types of peat soils. But as a summary, all you need to know so far is most of it is fan peat, the light green, a bit of bog peat, and all this other colorful stuff is those very degraded, covered, or deep plowed organic soils. So we were really bad and good in destroying the original peat soils. The land use in Germany is mainly agricultural, as many of you might know, and mainly grassland. So if we want to change land use or we have to find a solution for especially high intensity dairy farming. There's also some cropland and forestry. And it doesn't come as a surprise. Jan already said it. We have around 50 million tons of CO2 equivalents per year, and a new approach with a dynamic water level map, so it changes from year to year. And this also means that most of the emissions from agriculture and agriculturally used soils actually come from drained organic soils. So I thought I want to talk about the status quo and the ways forward, and in what regard. Do we talk about science, practice, or policy? And I will go through all three issues briefly, and most of the policy stuff has been said by Jan already. So some important strategies and plans. We have this agreement between the federal states and the federal government, the National Peatland Strategy, and the first amendment to the Climate Change Act with the GHG LULUCF target. Jan presented the one for 2045. This is the one for, well, within 5 years' time. And we have the action plan on nature-based climate solutions, which has quite a bit of money in it 10 fields of action, and number one is the protection of near natural peatlands and rewetting. And there are some funding lines specifically for peatlands, for more near natural peatlands, for capacity building and adapted machinery. But unfortunately, the large scale paludiculture funding line is still pending and really needed if we want to make a change on more than a few hectares. Behind the driving force behind is the LULUCF sector and the emissions. And as Jan mentioned, we switched from a situation close to a, does it work? No. It's not working well. 2017 to 18, we switched from a close to neutral situation to a strong source. And this is mainly because of forest calamities, but also because of the ongoing emissions from drain organic soils. And these are the goals for from the Climate Change Act. And yeah, if we think we can manage the goals of the agreement between the federal states and the federal governments, we still have a gap of 80 million tons CO2 equivalents within 5 years. I don't think that any lawsuit will make trees grow that fast. So maybe in some future times, but not for 2030. But things need to be done urgently because we have a changing climate, and of course things need to be done for peatlands as well. So what's the science base behind it? We are in a very, very fortunate situation in Germany that we have 10 projects which run to up to 10 years, funded by both ministries for agriculture and for the environment. We presented on the Klima Farm, but there are 9 others with different foci and different specializations, and we are also happy that we have a coordination project together with the Greifswald-Meyer Center to bring together all this experience. So this is a huge chance and also a huge responsibility because, well, obviously lots of money has been spent on it and high hopes are on the results of these projects. But scientists have been busy before these projects, and we measured at fan paludicultures. It's an ongoing project, NAPALU, and we found, including harvest, that we have really a huge carbon sink within these fan paludicultures, up to 15 tons of CO2, and better than we expect from the usually used function for the emission reporting for rewetted peatlands. So we ask ourselves, well, can this be true? Did we make any errors? This is weird. But luckily, our Bavarian colleagues did similar experiments and just published a very nice paper in Global Change Biology, and found also under fully rewetted conditions a sink, now CO2 equivalent, so including methane, of more than 10 tons CO2 equivalents. If Matthias Drösler will still come, he will probably talk in more detail on this. I will finish on science results because of times now, but I wanted also to talk about unknowns and ways forward. So, of course, the question is it root growth? How long can we have this really huge carbon sink while maintaining yields? Because it all costs, of course, also nutrients. And that brings me to my favorite topic, water and nutrient management, also at the catchment scale. Because as others said before, the adjacency problem, single actors may not be able to change anything. And there will be, with ongoing climate change, also future competition for water. We have the situation that some of the peatlands are surrounded by groundwater abstraction wells, and this, of course, influences everything. And we had also the question whether we will have or have enough water for rewetting peatlands. At the moment, lots of water is drained away by artificial drainage networks. So it's, for me, it's more a question of retention. And also we might have co-benefits with the use of nutrients in surface waters. Wiebke already mentioned that we need improved harvesting techniques, and Jan told a bit about products and value change. There's, of course, lots to be improved, which brings me to the practice. The similar truck picture than you showed before, maybe even the similar truck. Okay, sphagnum farming as one example. It's a rough. So practice, some examples. Not all of the potential value chains. First of all, sphagnum farming, which is quite far advanced and rather easy if you have still thick, moderately degraded peat, and more difficult under shallow, strongly degraded peat. And Greta Gaudig of the University Greifswald-Meyer Center had really been done a great job. And there's, of course, ongoing research on donor materials, harvest techniques, optimization of production systems. But in principle, the production chain is there and could be applied to larger areas. The other extreme, in a way, is the wet meadows, because they already exist in thousands of hectares, but the biomass is not used. The use is less specific. So paper, fiber casting, press plates, also the nice mats which has been used in the Wacken open air, and harvest techniques already exist. And it's good for large areas, low input systems, and also offers opportunities for breeding waders. There is lots of progress, and I'm very happy I don't have to repeat it. Jan already talked about the Tomorrow Initiative, so I can focus on another very important company, a private startup, Zukunft Moor, who started a private sphagnum farming company in an intensive dairy region. They bought land and they will increase their land by another 50 hectares this year. And so this will be really very interesting whether they will be actually able to make money with their farm. Coming to policy. This is an arbitrary collection of strategies and plans and other things. What I wanted to convey with this is it's complicated. Everyone is involved, and it's really a cross-cutting issue. And in the case of Germany, we have, of course, the EU, we have the federal government, but we also have the federal states. All these things need to be brought together to advance in this topic. Many aspects I summarize in my next slide has been worked out more in detail by Jan, and also in this law study by the University of Greifswald. So where could policy actually help? First of all, it's the funding. So paludiculture is a high investment, so it's not suitable for short-term measures such as eco schemes. And the paludiculture funding of the ANK will hopefully help. Where the voluntary market, which is existing in as more futures, is seen as extremely critical. But at the moment, money is there. So I was in the session on agroforestry, and I recognized some similarities to what we are talking in paludiculture. So the solution is there. There are pioneers who are highly motivated, but things are complicated and still too expensive to really make money with it. So I think those two communities could actually learn quite a bit from each other. There's a very complex planning and approval procedure. Everyone is responsible. Sometimes nobody has the lead in it, and this leads to long procedures. And different legal areas might pose challenges. Jan elaborated on this: water, nature conservation, soil protection, forest law. And only if you start really a rewetting project, you will find out what actually will be the challenge, but because it depends on individuals. So guidelines and standardization, as Jan pointed out, would help. And capacities are also an issue because someone needs to do all the rewetting, the planning, and driving also the digger. Finally, we have the common agricultural policy, which is rather a hindrance so far. We have a missing eligibility for the first pillar because paludiculture products are neither counted as agricultural product or activity. If there are too many sedgents, it's not accepted as grassland anymore, and farmers are risking to lose their payments. And this situation is really very complicated, and if you're not a lawyer, it's really hard to grasp. Also, conversion of grassland to planted paludiculture, such as sphagnum paludiculture, might be treated as conversion to cropland, and you might be asked to find a cropland to convert to grassland, which is also quite bizarre because the grassland protection is because of climate for one part. Well, to summarize, paludiculture offers huge opportunities to decrease emissions from LULUCF while maintaining production and reaching any LULUCF goals without having wet peatlands is not possible. And also reaching all these 4 per mil goals, even if we manage to not only hold carbon levels in mineral soils, but actually to increase it, it will be all offset by drained peatland emissions if nothing is done. Paludiculture is not, of course, not the solution everywhere. We have also restoration for nature protection, which might be an option or the way to go in other areas. Then there is demand for biomass from paludiculture. Jan has shown it nicely. The problem is really the intensive dairy farming because the revenue is quite high. Rewetting is a long-term commitment, which needs both security in terms of finances and human capacities. And planning and approval is complicated. So general planning obligations at the catchment scale in landscape planning might be a way forward. Finally, a long-term strategy is needed, not only until 2030, because that is like tomorrow, in peatland timescales, and farmers need to adapt and plan ahead and need to know whether their son or daughter might be able to continue farming if they have a dairy farm. So long-term strategies might also increase acceptance. And finally, of course, monitoring is needed to be able to quantify and communicate success. Yes, thank you so far. There have been data and thoughts and so on from many projects. And thank you for staying until the end. I appreciate it a lot. And we will have a look now where our presenters. Are there any questions? Yeah. Anyone?
Maybe standard agricultural commodities. So is there a big conflict in changing the land uses now, using, well, not planting food crops anymore in that sense? Yeah.
Well, most conventional commodities just don't grow under wet conditions. I mean, there was this example of blueberries and cranberries that's to be discussed. An exemption might be water buffaloes, but you can't easily convince a dairy farmer to become a water buffalo farmer because the systems are so different. So, of course, there's big skepticism. But also there are, I mean, I really liked the talk of the agroforestry farmer with the apple trees before the session, and he was also asked, well, how about your conventional pig farming? And he said, well, yeah, right, I don't like it, but I have my financial constraints. And I think lots of peatland farmers are in a similar situation, that they know that it's not a sustainable way to go, but if they want to continue farming, well, they don't have, there's no easy transition at the moment because the funding lines are not there yet. And it's not that you just can fill in a CAP formula support scheme and then get your money and you're safe, and that you will have money for the next years. So I also liked this picture from flying while assembling the plane. It's a bit a situation like this.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the talks, and maybe that's also a question to all the presenters. Where do you see like the biggest obstacles in rewetting? Like, is it getting the farmers on board? Is it the implementation legislations? And so, like, I really like the idea of first getting the companies on board and creating this like circularity. But maybe you have some insights on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think at the moment we have a situation where it's still very complicated, and the future is unsure how to transform for farmers. So the value chains need to be developed and the policy framework need to be developed. I think that's the main obstacles. And what is also different to other transition to alternative land use, like the apple trees, you can't do it without the approval of your neighbors, as long as you don't have a very large farm. So this also requires the fitting instruments to have cooperatives and so on. So yeah, that's probably that everything is still in a pioneer phase while having a very complicated bureaucracy is probably the biggest obstacle.
I just agree. I can. There's actually no. I cannot add anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of that for Ireland as well. But I suppose we have an additional complication with turbary rights. So there's still peat cutting going on. So there's an additional layer of complexity. We have a lot smaller farms who have much smaller areas. And yeah, I know you don't like blueberries, but they're working very well, and also in the UK. So we'll talk about that after. But I suppose the idea there is that it's a decent income for, and then also the question who would do it. The idea is from a relatively small area, you can get a decent return. So I think for us, in addition, as I said, it really needs to be much more of I suppose for us, we've done good work on individual farms, and the next step is to bring in, and we have a group of farmers who would be interested, is to go to the next level. But step by step, you know, we can't go from, you know, so we have dairy as the kind of the dominant industry in Ireland as well, but that took over 100 years to develop through the cooperatives. We're not going to go from, you know, 1 to 100 in a short space of time. But I think it's the demonstration, it's the awareness raising. So we do our current project, Peatlands for Prosperity. We bring the peatland farmers, we show them, say, look, this is something, it's growing, the farmer can tell you. And then also I think another thing is actually get money to a farmer for growing and selling stuff. And one other thing, yeah, we have a new peatland standard for Ireland. So again, because the small size of the peatland areas that farmers have, we want to do a group project and actually try and get some carbon money. So I think that should help. And then also, I suppose, but we have the benefit that a lot of this land is abandoned and it's not being used, but we just got to capitalize on this.
Maybe just to add, what we really see in our project is, as I mentioned, the high interest in the, let's say, in everything what we do, so in how the rewetting works, how we really practice the harvesting, and yeah, we always hear about some social media chats that people are really coming to our farm, taking pictures and want to know what's happening. And I have the feeling that farmers, somehow know that there will be a change or they have to adapt to a new situation, but it results, really sometimes in a lot of skepsis and fear of what will happen. So that's actually really also a big problem for us.
Yeah, just maybe one thing to add, especially regarding paludiculture, is that, I mean, conventional agriculture has developed either over decades or even centuries. They had a lot of time for choosing the right crops to build up all the value chain, kind of the agricultural value chain behind it. And the pity is that most of these crops don't grow on wet soils. So we have to work with new ones. We have to look much more into this fiber market, which is not so much in agriculture, but quite often forestry market. So you also have to go to like different sectors. You have to bring new people together. You have to like form the like different pieces of the value chain in the new way. And this is kind of a puzzle, which we are working on, but it's complicating things because, as you said, it's nothing you can do just click and then you have it. And also like agriculture in general took like centuries or even millennia to develop this thing. And so we have to do, of course, to do it faster and in larger scale. But that's, of course, a challenge but we take that challenge.
Okay, yeah, who wants to have the closing word? Are there any comments or questions? Okay, then thank you for staying. As a thank you, we will be the first in the coffee line and in the cake line. So see you later.